everyone. This is John Daly again with BQB Publishing and Right Life Publishing. I'm here today with Harriet Hodgson, author of the book Grief Doodling. How are you doing today, Harriet?
I am great, thank you.
Good, good. So tell me a little bit about yourself, about your background and your interests.
Well, I live in the Midwest, but I grew up in Great Neck, Long Island, New York. Great Neck was the original home of the United Nations before it moved into New York City. So I went to school with some of the delegates' children. I lived in a neighborhood of similar houses. And when I think back about my childhood, I started making and illustrating books for friends when I was about 8 years old. So I think it's part of me. I always had some kind of a art project or a writing project going.
Very cool.
And yeah, and it was a wonderful place to grow up. I guess Great Neck has really become a bedroom community now for New York City. But when I lived there, there was a dairy in the middle. You know, it was still kind of a country village. It's called a village to this day.
Oh, wow. So from what I understand, Grief Doodling is actually the 317th book you've written. Is that correct?
Well, I would call that a bit of an exaggeration. Um, so I have two books in production, and that will make 44. But
Wow.
it's different writing than you do, John. I mean, some of it is children's books, some of it is workbooks, some of it is health and wellness books that are very researched. I always have a long resource list because I want people to know I do my homework.
Right,
But
right.
yeah, so Grief Doodling, Bringing Back Your Smiles is the latest in my quest. I'm very pleased with it, actually.
Good, good. Now this is sort of you've done a lot of different types of books, and this is very unique for a couple of reasons. But this is the first book you've illustrated for, is that correct? For of your own, I mean.
Yes, it is. And I didn't plan to do this at all. Um, to be honest, I had tested positive for COVID,
Oh,
and I live in a retirement community, and so I was quarantined. And fortunately, as a freelancer, I was used to working from home. But at the time I wrote Grief Doodling, actually, I was caring for my disabled husband, and his health was failing. So not only was my own background in the book, but my most recent experience was in the book. And I apologized to my husband. I said, I'm sorry. I haven't disappeared. I'm in my little office. I'm in my writing zone. And he just laughed and because he understood. And I should tell you that every time I finish a book, I think it's going to be my last. So my husband thought that was hilarious. And so when I finish a book, he treated it like getting him a cup of coffee. He said, "While you're up, write me another book."
there you
And
go.
it turns out I usually did. So I was in the writing zone and brought all of my writing experience and my extensive grief experience to that book.
And can you
And
talk about,
it's not,
oh, I'm sorry, I was gonna say, can you talk about how you brought that doodling experience, how that ties in with grief?
well, grief and I are very well acquainted, maybe too well acquainted. So I'm still a recent widow. I'm a bereaved mother. My daughter died from the injuries she received in a car crash. I'm a bereaved daughter and sister and cousin and friend, and I even grieve for the wonderful golden retrievers we had in our lives. So And I have written other grief resources. I think about 9 of them. I think maybe Grief Doodling is the 10th. And I also work part-time for an organization called Open to Hope, which is online grief support. So all of that came together in Grief Doodling, but nonetheless, it was a real writing challenge.
Oh wow. Oh wow. So along those lines, what would you say was the hardest part about writing that book?
Well, when people are grieving, they want reliable help and they want available help immediately. They don't want to read a poem. I have a lot of grief books in my personal library, but I was grieving. I had anticipatory grief while my husband was still alive. Anticipatory grief is very powerful. I wrote a book about that. And so I looked at all of these resources and I thought, gee, I don't have the patience or even the time to read any of them. So I wanted something that people would relate to. And that gave me the idea of doodling because everybody doodles. I mean, there are different kinds of doodles. You may doodle from your subconscious mind while you're sitting in a class and starting to get bored. Or you doodle from your conscious mind where you plan the doodle a little bit more. And then, I mean, you could make a case that the cavemen were the first doodlers. So I thought, gee, this will have broad appeal. Well, here I was in my apartment. When I say that I was quarantined, I mean that in big letters, neon, because I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. I had to put my trash outside my door. Um, I had to have some laundry done, stuff like that. And so I was in my own little cocoon in a way, but in another way, it was familiar. So I started writing. I thought of my own grief experience. I've been researching grief for decades, ever since my daughter died in 2007. And I started writing, and the biggest challenge, John, to get back to your question, was being brief. And in a way, it was like writing poetry because every little word, and the became important. And after I wrote a little bit about the benefits of doodling, why doodling is fun, I show people some very simple techniques that you can use to create doodles. And then there are the prompts, and there are grief prompts. And I thought, okay, I've got the sentences now, but are the prompts clear? So I had to go through the manuscript again and ensure that they were clear. And my publisher, Right Life, asked to have a doodle on every page. And you might get a kick out of this, but the first doodles I did were not doodly enough. They were too precise. So I threw them all out and I started again. And I kept thinking, doodle, doodle, make it, just make it as wonky as you can. You're doodling. And then I finally achieved what I wanted. And the cover includes just some random doodles that I did and sent to the designer.
It's a great cover. I
So
really like it.
yeah, well, it turned out to be a bigger challenge than I thought. And again, brevity was my goal. I wanted to help people as reliably and quickly as I could because I've been there.
Yeah.
I've been there and I had anticipatory grief from my husband a long time. I mean, we both knew he was dying. We didn't talk about it because we'd been married for 63 years. And in 63 years, you pretty much covered everything.
Right.
So we just decided to enjoy our last days together.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you say the most rewarding part about writing a lot of your books really is just taking those experiences of hardship you've had and hoping they can help other people through that hardship and other people have a better time of things.
Well, that's probably the real reason I write. I also write to figure things out. And, you know, as a basically a nonfiction writer, I'm used to doing research. So when I'm perplexed about something, I start researching that topic. And when it comes to research, I can be relentless. And Grief Doodling actually contains a resource list. And I
Oh,
could have made that list longer, but I thought, well, that's a waste of time, the reader's time and my time. But I wanted people to know that I had thought about this and done some homework. And going back to being quarantined, I kept track of the statistics and how the epidemic swept across this country and indeed the world. And I used to teach. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in early childhood education. I taught for a dozen years. And the more I thought about COVID, the more concerned I became about children. And I read one report that it was from CBS News, that there are 40,000 children in the United States grieving for the death of a parent due to COVID. That's an old statistic. We've had variants since then, and the statistic is going up. But when I originally wrote Grief Doodling, I was thinking of kids, and I wrote it for basically tweens and teens. But the feedback I'm getting is different. And grief experts are saying that this book is for all ages. And I mean, even if a kid scribbles, um, they will be expressing their feelings with the scribble. And people have asked me, I do have a master's degree in art education. You do not need any kind of degree to use this book. It gets you involved from the beginning. All you need is a pencil, a pen, a watercolor marker, and you're all set. And there are places to practice the techniques, and there are some blank pages in the back to continue doodling.
well, it sounds like a great resource for sure. So, as I mentioned, you've written lots of nonfiction books, you know, covering everything from relationships to self-help to grieving, family themes. You even have a cooking one, at least one cooking one. But I was curious. So, you have a new children's fiction book coming out later this year called First Steps, First Snow. Can you talk about that a little? And was this your first real venture into fiction writing?
Well, in a sense, it isn't fiction because First Steps, First Snow is based on a real experience that my husband and I had together at the family cabin. And the cabin is in Wisconsin, and it had been snowing all day, basically blizzard conditions. We were lucky to get to the cabin. And, uh, you know, we kind of unpacked, and our two daughters went to bed, and we noticed that the snow was letting off a bit. And after the huge blizzard, a bright moon came out. I mean, it almost seemed out of place. And the moonlight glistened off the snow. And it was so bright out that usually on a walk like that, you would need a flashlight because the cabin is in a forest. But we didn't need a flashlight. And so we went out and took a walk in the snow. And that experience stayed with me, and I wrote a poem about it, the same title, First Steps, First Snow. And the poem was published in 1983 in the American Poetry Anthology. And after my husband died, quite frankly, I kind of reviewed my life. What did I do? What did I wish I had done? And I thought about the poem. And I thought, you know, with the right illustrator, it would be a wonderful children's book. So I found the illustrator, we worked together, and it is a wonderful children's book. And we added pictures of animals, nocturnal animals. So that got me researching who's out at night, which animals are out at night, which animals are snuggled in, and settled in. And at the end of the book, all the animals go to sleep, and the two kids that are in the story, representing my husband and I, the two kids are sound asleep. So they've had a wonderful walk on a moonlit night, I guess you would say. And kids have learned about nature. They've learned a little bit about the forest. They've learned a little bit about nocturnal animals. And it's a wonderful bedtime story for all ages. That doesn't mean that a few tired parents might not go to sleep while they're reading it, but early readers will get a kick out of it. Again, the vocabulary is very simple. And I just tried to describe that walk in as few words as I could. And I'm so pleased that it is now going to be a book. So,
Well, that's great. That sounds great. And I want to thank you for joining me today. This has been great. We've talked a lot over email over the years, but this is the first time we've actually sort of gone face to face, digitally anyway, but it was great getting to see you and talk to you this way. Can you tell people who are watching this how to find out more about you and the 317 books you've written?
yeah, well, you can, everything pretty much is on Amazon, but I do have a website, Harriet Hodgson. And oh, by the way, Harriet has one T. Hodgson is difficult, Hodgson, harriethodgson.com. Actually, John, I hate to admit it, I have stumbled over my own name, but when I saw my husband's beautiful brown eyes, that was it. So
Uh,
I
I,
became HH, Harriet Hodgson.
as someone who's been called John Daly instead of Daly many times over the years, I can
I'm not alone.
yes. Oh no. Oh no. Well, thanks again, Harriet. It was great. It was great getting to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure
Talk
thing.
to you again, I hope.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Bye.